The future is headless. Your front end. I am Ash Cooper. Been in the MSP sphere since 2009. So there's this balance between consumption and service. Your customers need to feel a little bit like they're in charge of what it is that they're buying. Thing that is more than just a buzzword, but also a way to say, hey, doing business with MSPs is more than B2B. I'm sure that you've heard of it, but have you seen examples of born from that exact pain? My goal, if I were to do one of those newspaper headline, actually solved the unification problem of common MSP vendor problems. The thing when people try to do that is that they try to shoehorn what they think is the right process and make people follow it, and then they don't follow it, and then people hate processes because they say they're too rigid. Have you ever been part of one of my processes though? Because they're human first. Where are you more likely to break? Free education and open source support will be the biggest revenue driver of your business as you grow.
Ashley, welcome to the MSP Insider Show. Please tell the audience who you are, what you do, and why the hell that you do it.
I am Ash Cooper. I have been in the MSP sphere space since I started at one in 2009. I quickly became fascinated with tools and how we use them to solve business problems. And then that catapulted my career out from there. I went from my MSP to being a consultant for MSPs, did that for about 5 years, and then went over to work for Epic Networks, there for 5 years, almost 5 years. And then I've been doing a variety of things since creating MSP Roost. I am actively involved in many communities. MSP Geek, Cyberdrain is my current main. I am the COO there, focused on our community, open source, and growth initiatives.
Yeah, awesome. So there's many reasons why I'm excited to dive into a conversation with you, but one that I think is very unique to very, very few people, and you are one of them, is truly having your finger on the pulse of so much surface area of the industry, especially as it relates to the practitioners, right? The people that are in the seats clicking the buttons and typing on the keyboard. There's very few people that are as close to the communities as you in that seat, right, as a moderator for so many and just being involved in so many. So it's refreshing and exciting to be able to have the higher level conversation, but with someone who has access to, this is going to come out wrong, but the lower level, just the all levels, right? Not a judgmental statement, just getting access
Speaker for
to
the
those
technical
people. Yeah,
kind of thing. Yeah.
And the nice part there too is because you get to see it across such a breadth of not only communities, but then the MSPs, the people that make it up, is you really are in a unique position to curate, whether it be opinions or thoughts or experiences or what is or is not happening out there. So excited to be able to dive into that with you. Before we do though, we open the show every time with a question that is left behind by the previous guest. And so the guest that the question for you comes from is Joe Rojas with Start, Grow, Manage. And his question is, what is the most important mindset shift that an MSP has to do in order to really be able to command price?
Ooh. Command price from their clients
services.
or their vendors, or
for their services to their clients.
Their services to their clients.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh. I don't think that there's one thing. This is one thing. I have to come up with one thing.
You can come up with as many as you feel like need to fit into that answer.
I think that there is I think there's a unified strategy that we all need to understand, but can be adapted to any business, but specifically for MSPs dealing with their clients. There's been it's so funny. There's a back and forth between being product focused and being service focused when it comes to what you're like, what's better or what's
Hmm.
more of the value add, like
Hmm.
versus just being another traditional VAR. But I think
Yeah.
like coming back to that VAR mentality of like standing behind the things that you are doing and how they are enhancing the solutions. Like if you were to like take like a slice of the pie that Gary Pica used to talk about
Hmm.
back in the day,
Yeah.
where it's like you need to not be trying to sell the individual ingredients, right?
Mm.
Like, but at the same time, they need to be clear and transparent. So there's this balance between consumption um, and service. And I read this really interesting article about one company that allowed people to choose. I
Mm.
think it was actually AI based, but it
Mm.
was like they were allowing people to choose, like, are you going to pay per
Mm.
conversation or are you going to pay per resolution?
Yeah.
And they're two very different business models, but like,
Hmm.
not to say that that's right or wrong, but it is an interesting perspective to be woven into everything, which is like your
Yeah.
customers need to feel a little bit like they're in control or they're in charge of like what it is that they're buying.
Hmm.
But at the same time, that's not to say that you can't market and position that as in here's why the things that you're looking for are long-winded answer. I guess it's more like the proper positioning around like the additional knowledge and experience that you bring on top of the products and on top of the
Mm.
consumption, while letting them be involved with how they consume. So
Yeah.
like Azure, or like Microsoft does with like Azure type of thing.
Yeah. I don't know that I would have thought of it on my own. I really like that you even brought up, kind of one of the, at least from today's perspective, like the dirtier acronyms of VAR, because it's just kind of been so long ago. But if you unpack even what that is, where you're really talking about being a value added reseller, if you just took off
Mm-hmm.
the reseller notion and you just focused on the fact that we're bringing value back to the equation a bit,
Yeah,
or at least we need to bring value back into the equation,
yeah,
and rather than just like the box pusher or the commodity component of, we're
yeah.
24/7 and we're proactive and we care, like those things don't really add value anymore. So that was the part that I really anchored into in your answer, was between that oscillation is like we do have to, as an industry, get back to shifting our focus to
Yeah.
caring about the things that do provide value
And it's the
for.
same for vendors and solution providers alike, in the sense
Mm.
where it's like I've done a lot of research because like I'll let you know, like it's silly, but I've been trying to come up with this thing that is more than just a buzzword, but also a way to say, hey, doing business with MSPs is more than B2B.
Mm.
And it's more than like, have you you heard of like, I'm sure that you've heard of it, but like have you like seen examples of like the B2D, the business to developer
Mm-mm.
motion, where so like GitHub and
Okay.
like companies that are like usage based, that rely on the developer
Mm-hmm.
as their like their builder of the advocacy of the tool
Sure.
and the adoption internally.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole concept of B2D is that you're treating the developer as the decision maker,
Okay.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
the developer in this case is just that technical advocate that needs more than a sales pitch
Mm-hmm.
with value propositions that map to features with no actual implementation of like how that works in real life, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so my pitch is this concept that like we need like this B2 MSP
Mm-hmm.
model from the vendor side. And then I haven't gotten into the details of like the how that looks reverse
Yeah.
wise, but like as a vendor or as a solutions provider who is saying like I understand my MSP's businesses,
Mm-hmm.
there's like a level of recognition that they are similar to B2D, B2B when you're talking about like
Mm.
the needs for collaborative pricing and scalable solutions and like contract renewal discussions,
Yeah.
but they're not just that, and their businesses need more of that value bar kind
Mm-hmm.
of approach. And so like
Yeah.
if you were to layer like a traditional VAR with
Mm-hmm.
the new age B2B, with that combination of recognition that developer mindsets,
Mm-hmm.
which are like you were saying earlier, like I wrote it down because you kind of proved it for me there too, as like as MSPs we are seeking that more peer-led discussion,
Mm,
more real conversation, like I
yeah.
and then like looking for online communities. Like I don't want to hear from the vendor, I want to hear
Mm-hmm.
from the other people who are using it.
Right.
And I want to be engaged in those types of conversations. That's
Yeah.
very similar to like the B2D, like these people are out there, you need
Mm,
to engage externally.
yeah.
And so when you marry all those things together,
Mm-hmm.
you kind of come up with like, and I've got like quotes from a few different people. I haven't, I'll show it to you. I'll
Sure.
send you the link if you want to read it. The problem is that most people don't want to read it because it's like 7 pages long at this
Yeah, no,
point.
I'd love to
But
read it because it's really tapping into like one of my core beliefs, and we talked about it at the opening before we hit record. Is coming out of 18 years at 5 different MSPs, 7 different times, I was in leadership for maybe 12 of those 18 years, which
mm-hmm,
put me in, I would just call it like the buyer seat, right? So like I was making decisions for the organization, oftentimes that dealt with which vendor, which partner, which outside entity are we going to deal with for this thing.
yeah,
And I like the B2D scenario that you presented because really that was the first time I've even heard another conceptual um, motion and an actual acronym that could be assigned to the way that I always felt like it was broken as the MSP
mm-hmm,
dealing with all these
exactly.
vendors before I switched to being a vendor that's now serving MSPs. But the goal that I had, a sub goal, right, as part of how we approach the market is the vast majority of the vendors that I dealt with when I was an MSP failed at solving through the problems that their solution created for me as the MSP. And what I mean
Mm-hmm,
by that is like a solution, one or more, or creates one or more additional problems for me to operationalize it. And when the vendor fails to acknowledge or see or understand that those problems exist only because I've adopted their solution, and then they don't solve through it, or they don't have the professional services to help me solve it, or they don't have the onboarding, or they don't have the enablement, or
mm-hmm.
they don't have the tools, or they don't have the community, whatever it is, it
They were
doesn't
thinking
matter.
from the perspective of the product
Right.
instead of from the
Yeah.
perspective. Yeah,
Versus like understanding what it's like to sit in our seats
yeah,
as the practitioner
exactly.
and then solve it in such a way that doesn't force me to change my behavior either. Maybe, ideally, right? Because the
Yeah,
other thing that frustrated me about it was the average MSP has what, like 18 tools in their stack or something. So if you have 18 different vendors who've all taken that approach of like, you come to me, you need what I have, and you just shut up and take it how I've developed it,
yeah,
you're asking me to dance between 18 different icebergs rather than
yeah,
all of you collectively realizing what it's like to
exactly.
sit inside the practitioner seat of an MSP
Yeah.
and build the damn thing the way that we need to use it
Mm-hmm.
and show up
That's where
and
this was.
support us that way.
Yeah, it was
Go
like
ahead.
born from that exact pain, right? Where it was
Yeah.
like, like I don't understand why multi-tenancy is still a problem
Mm-hmm.
that we haven't solved. My goal, my dream, like if I were to like do like one of those like exercises with like a newspaper headline in the
Mm-hmm.
future would be like Ashley solved the unification problem of um, common MSP vendor problems.
Yeah.
Like here's a database of Team Logic IT domains.
Mm-hmm.
Here's how you should structure multi-tenancy in your environment in a scaffolding. Here's a Python example. Here's
Mm.
a whatever. Like literally like import it the way that you import React. Like
Yeah.
don't try to solve this over and over again in 17 different ways and then have your vendors like coming to like you hear even a Bruce is like, well, I don't manage my child accounts that way. I
Mm.
make them as sites underneath,
Yeah.
or
Right.
I make them as this way. And the
Yeah.
reasons why they do it one way or the other is because inevitably they're accommodating some other thing that
Mm-hmm.
said, well, just do it this way, use sites. Well, I can't change from sites because that's how this one imports it.
Yeah.
And it's like that you're building your processes around your product, and it's cool to
Mm-hmm.
do. And I love doing that when the reality hits you and you're
Mm-hmm.
like, I can't move further.
Yeah.
You hit one of my sore spots there. Sorry.
No,
I
it's one of mine too. It's again why I changed sides of
um,
the aisle. I want to see it done differently.
I built an entire job out of my MSP when I was there. I started as a dispatcher
Hmm.
with like help desk. Like I
Sure.
didn't have a car, I couldn't drive on site places, so I just like I did all the remote work. I like changed passwords, I did backup checks. Um, all that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
then I schedule, and then I just like, we brought on ConnectWise. I started scheduling out the staff. And then, so I just naturally built our processes at our
Hmm.
MSP on top of what ConnectWise's capabilities were,
Right.
which I'm sure a lot of companies do.
Hmm.
But although also surprisingly, a lot of them just don't ever implement their processes into their PSA
Yeah.
and like keep them in their old whatever
Hmm.
approach. Um, my goal at my MSP was to make everything run through ConnectWise, because even in finance, like, why are you doing a journal entry for something that literally has a product that sales is adding to a quote over here? Like,
Hmm.
if we set things up and if we make
Yeah.
sure that our projects are triggered off of our sales
Yeah.
orders,
Right.
then when we invoice, it'll go over. Like, you don't have to do this extra work. And so I kind of like bulldozed everybody into following, like,
Hmm.
but the thing when people try to do that is that they try to shoehorn
Hmm.
what they think is the right process and make people follow it, and then they don't follow it, and then people hate processes because they say they're too rigid.
Yeah.
Whereas like, have you ever been part of one of my processes though? Because they're human first, right?
Hmm.
Where are you more likely to break
Mm.
down, and how can we help pick that flow back up? As somebody who
Yeah.
has ADHD and is always trying to think about the flow of data, I respect that in my stuff, and so I build
Hmm.
stuff to that, which is another topic about how we all build to our own beliefs and needs. But
Hmm.
that's why some people are really good builders, right?
Yeah.
Because like, I like to do a pain chain exercise
Mm.
before I even start solving for something that is like multi-system, right? It's like,
Yeah.
oh, um, like, how many people have tried to figure out weird workarounds to the fact that their customers email directly, the tickets get replied to, and then all of a sudden the emails are going back and forth, and the dispatcher or
Yeah.
whoever doesn't have insight into them. Like, that's a common problem.
Hmm.
It's like, okay, well, ConnectWise has this feature called an in-out board. The
Mm.
only purpose that it serves is that when you're set to out, anything that the system would send to you also sends to your team lead. We don't use team leads
Mm.
in the system, so let's set the dispatch account to everybody's team lead and set everybody to out of the office.
Right.
So now dispatch is getting updated on every single ticket update.
Mm.
There's no other accommodations on service boards, nothing. And it's like, that's a hack,
Yeah.
but it was a hack that wouldn't have had a solution otherwise,
Mm.
right? And those are the ones that need to be separated from like well, why do I need to keep this here? Oh, because if you delete it, then this other
Yeah.
separate thing will break
Hmm.
because it depends on it,
Right.
and you can't do that. And we've had it in place for 10 years, right?
Yeah. 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 It's the essence that there's a little bit, it comes from both sides. MSPs feel as though they're their own special snowflakes. So they do things their own way. They like to have their DNA on it, and that's fine. And then that's compounded and complicated by every product sort of forcing you into the way the product was built and or designed, to your point, which then forces you into either crazy workflows to work around what its limitation is based on product and process, or bending the product to your will, which is kind of what your example was, where it's like, well, we'll use this feature, this function that wasn't designed for this thing, but we can leverage the way that it works to our advantage to accomplish what we need. One of the things that I found very interesting that you mentioned, though, maybe you can even take us through an example so that people understand what that exercise goes through, is the pain chain. Because
Mm-hmm.
I knew it, but you don't often hear a lot of people talking through that specific to service. Maybe you can walk us
Yeah.
through an example.
Yeah, so it's something that I did at my MSP all the time, because everybody, as like with the PSA, one of the things, and I think that that's why I came to learn this, or be so involved in this, and
Mm-hmm.
why I love new tools that allow this connection, even though it's actually the problem too. But so, for example, like, we need to solve for um, the high level example I gave was the finance one, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I have sales who want to be able to report on their successful opportunities
Mm-hmm.
and then be able to run commissions reports or whatever. But then they have all these like extra details and nuances, like, well, only when they're um, uh, invoiced or only when they're paid, or
Mm.
like clawback in these scenarios
Yeah.
or whatever. And then we have down here, like we have like finance, and we have like these like hard coded connections into like Excel sheets, and we have
Mm.
um, journal entries, and we have like, well, every time that somebody does this, I go into ConnectWise and I do this,
Mm-hmm.
and then I come out and I do all of these other things. And so, like, by meeting with the person at the front, which is like, what are you trying to solve for? And there's like a template
Mm-hmm.
online, but what are you trying to solve for? And then like capture those things, and then where's that handoff, or like where does the data need to come from other people or other places,
Mm.
and where are the struggles that you're experiencing in this? Like, what is the problems with that, right? And so
Yeah.
like you're encouraging them to think within their own like silo, which is where they know their information best.
Mm-hmm.
But like I'm being kind of like that elbow joint into the next step. It's like, okay, so then they mentioned that like the sales rep does this thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll go talk to a sales rep, and then the sales rep, they give me the same types of things. Like my quotes get entered into Quozal, and then I have to go over into ConnectWise and I have to manually update this activity so that, or this opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
so that whatever, right? And so then like I'm not writing down any
Yeah.
solutions yet, but I am writing the things down that are like being mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then they're like, and then I have to tell the dispatcher or check whether the stuff has been arrived. Like she'll maybe like Kathy will message me when things arrive, and that's when I'll know to tell the dispatcher to schedule the project. And I just kind of have tasks for myself to remind myself to check in with people on that. And so then I go and talk to Kathy, and I'm like, how are you doing the ordering for this? It's like, oh, well, they're ordered through like Quozal's connection to Ingram, and then that comes in, and then I get them in, and then I go into the opportunity and I change the status of the opportunity that the
Mm.
products have arrived. Um, and then that informs so and so, and so then I keep going and I hear
Yeah.
more about those, and then at the end I'm like looking at this big connection of like this problem leads from this, and this is because of this. And so
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they're like woven together and you won't know that until you've gone through it all. If I try and solve for this, I haven't gotten to here yet. I don't know
Yeah.
whether there's something that makes that easier. But now when I'm looking at that entire thing and I'm like, oh, actually, like Kathy wouldn't need to go
Mm.
into ConnectWise and set that status when things are received if
Yeah.
she were to associate the opportunity. If we connect the Quozal integration and set it up properly with the forecasting, then when they change this, it'll automatically convert the products. She'll know to order them. It'll automatically update. And
Mm-hmm.
so like by doing like one thing, by building out one process there, so I take kind of this scale of data and I turn it into different not silos, but different
Yeah.
processes, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
it's like a swim lane of like, and I have a workflow diagram that I can show you was the outcome of all of that, where it's
Yeah.
like this happens, then this, then this, then this,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's got all the automation. And people would be like, that's too complicated if I was trying to explain to them how I would build it.
Yeah.
But then at the end, it just works. Everybody is all right. Because like the finance person, like when you're talking about it,
Mm-hmm.
they already had going into ConnectWise. They were already in there. They're already
Mm-hmm.
in there looking at the invoice. They're just going over here and doing something else because
Yeah.
the products aren't on the
Aren't
invoice
there?
and their
Yeah.
GL mapping isn't set up properly.
Right.
And so it's like, okay, well, let's set up the GL mapping.
Mm-hmm.
That was the hardest. That's always the hardest part, right?
Yep. Yep.
I could today spin up probably another consulting company and have people reaching out for help setting up their GL mapping. And I could walk in and help
Mhm.
them, having not looked at the ConnectWise setup tables in years because
Yeah.
they haven't changed.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's a, like, those are the types of things where it's like, it takes somebody thinking
Mm.
not at the same detail as the individuals doing their individual depth of knowledge in all of those
Mhm.
different silos, but understanding how they all connect to each other.
Yeah.
And then being like, oh, this simple tweak here
Mhm.
takes away your pain. But so, like, the change that you experience, like from a change management perspective and from a mentality perspective, it's not, oh, this thing that's making things worse. It's,
Mhm.
oh my goodness, I don't have to do this thing anymore, right? And
Yeah.
it's
Right.
easier, and you're already where you live. And then if there's issues where it's like, oh, like this does have to happen externally, or
Mhm.
they do need to be able to do this other thing, and here's a gap. That's where, when those gaps, I'm looking at them like, okay, where do other products fit in? Right. And
Yeah.
so that's when we brought in, at the MSP, when we went through that, I was like, okay, let's bring in Nylier,
Mm.
because then that way, like,
Yeah.
the
We
one
can
problem that
prevent
we
the
hadn't
action.
figured out was like when they're traveling, like how do we, so then it was like, okay, well, here's a super easy way for you to track your travel. Press start,
Mhm.
get there, press end,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And that enters a time entry for travel.
Right.
Like, just removing roadblocks instead of creating them for the
Mhm.
sake of a process, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The essence of what I heard you say too, which is something that I see routinely ignored or at least just blitzed through, is creating the space to truly lean into the deep thinking work that can save you so much time and energy and pain, because we are kind of default action people, which is how we got into the situation that we are in. Like, we'll just
Yeah.
keep doing the work. And it reminds me of that cartoon where it's like the caveman with a wheelbarrow, but the wheels are square, and somebody's
Yeah.
walking by with a wheel and it's like, hey, could I change that out for you or whatever? And like, no, we got it. It's like, well,
Yeah.
if you just put the round wheel on instead of the square wheel, you would get there so much faster. But
Yeah.
you're kind of pot committed to the effort you've put in that you just won't slow down enough to put the round tire on. And that, like, is a perfect little illustration, I think, of how so many MSPs find their day-to-day existence.
I have to remember to send you this link, because it's such the ethos of that. And I don't think that I can send you messages here. No.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
but I was literally like the exact same thing. I was trying to figure out, how can we open source
Mm-hmm.
our knowledge from people who want to share knowledge and not try to be recreating the wheel all the
Yeah.
time. And
Yeah.
so, like, I built the MSPKB with Kelvin to be um, like a Git book kind of like
Mm-hmm.
landing page that anybody can consume, but also anybody can contribute to.
Mm-hmm.
And it can hopefully be like a decentralized, autonomous
Yeah.
collective. Um, but I built this landing page with Lovable's help, but it helps people generate, like, a give back profile. And I
Mm.
created one for myself because I wanted to be able to say, hey, I've got knowledge.
Yeah.
There's other places that are delivering knowledge. Let's have a centralized landing place to say, here's where knowledge can be
Mm.
found, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So let's go into that kind of origin story a little bit. Before the launch of Flow or your leadership with Cyberdrain, there had to have been this moment where you realized that the way that MSPs approached community and knowledge sharing was fundamentally broken. Walk me through that.
Um, I'll Yeah, so I think that there's a lot of research and knowledge that I still need to do on this side, especially from the MSP
Mm.
perspective in terms of all of the different personas, because, like, you touched on it a little bit, in what you said, but like one of the things that, um, where I've spent a lot of my time is making sure that other solution providers and vendors
Mm-hmm.
understand this about MSPs, that, like, hey, you can go into a community online or a peer group or a focus group, and none of those things are going to be telling you the whole picture, and you
Mm-hmm.
have to be intentional about how you're segregating those things out. And I think it's because of that where it's like, you're going to have people who are, I think it comes down to, everybody is going to approach things the way that their human potential or comfort level does,
Sure.
right? And so
Mm-hmm.
I approach and seek out online digital communities because I can like think out my thoughts and I can
Mm-hmm.
like have banter without worrying about interrupting. And
Yeah.
um, I approach technical communities because I like to showcase things like that. But like from a leadership perspective at an MSP, there's it's a human personality recognition that everybody's different kind of thing
Mm-hmm.
where it's like if you are um, you're the type of person who recognizes that like all of these things collectively
Mm-hmm.
are how we achieve success, and it's not like one versus the other,
Yeah.
and one's not wrong over the other, right? Like community as a whole is not an, a department. It's not a strategy.
Mm.
It's not like it's not anything other than what we all do all the time since the end of time,
Mm.
right? It's like
Yeah.
it's the reason why cities exist.
Mm-hmm.
It's the reason why like so like recognizing that like this is just a natural state of being a person,
Mm-hmm.
and that happens in different ways, and we all achieve belonging in different ways, and we see insight in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
It can be confusing, so we just need that unified like like you should be defining where you understand at a high level that community in whatever form you seek it in
Mm-hmm.
is valuable, and education in whatever form you seek it in is valuable. And
Yeah.
then when you set those kind of benchmarks, then you can be like, okay, how do we seek out
Mm-hmm.
community education? I think education, and if you were trying to like put this on like a hierarchy map, I would struggle with where to put education, because I think that people seek out community because they're seeking out education, but they
Mm.
seek out education in all different types of places as well.
Sure.
So I think that community is like this ephemeral kind of,
Yeah.
everything has it.
Right.
It's just how are you
Where
leveraging it?
what is the core like system or ethos behind the way that you build community or ship tools?
Uh, Building community as in like capital C community where people can come and find you. Do you mean
Yeah.
like that, or do you mean like the so like
Probably both, because I think the latter actually informs, how you made it tangible in
so
the
I think
former.
I differentiate it as like community spaces
Okay.
versus like the community being like
Got it.
they could be
Yep.
known or unknown, right?
Sure.
Like
Yep.
on a matrix, like who are the
Mm-hmm.
known people who you're building for.
Mm-hmm.
Those are how you start. It's
Yeah.
like, do you need this?
Yeah.
Like, is there a pain?
Mm.
That's usually how I start, right?
That's
Like, is
smart.
there a
Yeah.
pain that I'm trying to solve for?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm happy talking to people in one area and that is thriving and successful, why am I trying to change it for the sake of that?
Sure.
But then spaces
Mm-hmm.
where it's like I want a place where it's like I'm platforming to you, right? Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
delivering you information and you're engaging around this.
Yeah.
Um, I start with experimentation. Like usually, like I like grassroots approach. I like being like, here's like, um, I would go so far as to say that I always focus grassroots first.
Mm.
And where the need then comes in would be if I wanted to like build out my own automation
Sure.
that supported people, then I
Yeah.
would say, okay, now I need a space like a server or a tool. If I
Mm-hmm.
wanted, one thing I'm actually trying to figure out right now is like, where do I host if I wanted to like put on this thing that I'm noodling on, which is like a tool talk kind
Mm.
of
Yeah.
casual webinar type of thing where we can talk about products and how they work together.
Mm-hmm.
Um, where do I host that, right? Like, I don't want to do like one of these, like, oh, you have to log in, you have to be a known person, you have to be
Yeah.
a member. I don't want to build a community.
Mm.
I want it to be somewhere that can have a community come to it. I want it to be a
Mm-hmm.
lighthouse. And that, okay, that's what I like to focus on whatever I can to be a lighthouse.
Mm. Yeah.
That's my community approach.
Interesting.
I don't
Well,
throw darts.
yeah. What do you think is the most critical aspect of being the lighthouse? Like, what's the thing?
From my perspective,
Mm-hmm.
selfishly, it's when I believe something, and I've learned this over the years, so I'm lucky enough to like have some moments where I can recognize when these are, but it also is hit or miss.
Yeah.
But like, if I know that something is needed
Mm-hmm.
and it's not getting done for whatever reason, red tape,
Yeah.
positioning, misaligned goals, whatever, um, that's when I will like rally around that actual problem. And like, I'm from like a working genius perspective, I'm like discernment and ideation, right? So
Mm.
I can identify that something is wrong
Yeah.
from an issue, and I can like build like prototypes of like, here's how we could solve it. And
Yeah.
then voicing that,
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that sometimes that's something that is like hard for me to say, but
Mm-hmm.
I know that other people also feel that way, right? And
Yeah.
that's a
Like you
validation thing and
intrinsically
confidence
know it to
thing.
be true. Yeah. Interesting. Why do you
I know that
think?
that's not really what you were asking, but
No, it was. It was a good answer. Also, it's like deductive reasoning, right? Just having you talk it out, I think, helps other people feel seen and heard and understood too, because of the approach that you take, which is almost just as important as either the outcomes that you achieve or the way in which you go about doing it. Um, why do you think that so many vendors and MSP consultants get this so wrong?
because they hear things so loudly from their siloed audience of
Mm,
noise. I think that if people were to recognize or reflect on how big the pool is,
mm-hmm,
and not with like a grain of salt, but with a recognition that that voice is speaking for a subset of an audience,
mm-hmm,
but it's not your entire audience. Or if it is meant to be your entire audience, then why are you confusing this other use case or this other problem from a different audience just because they have some overlap with what's
mm-hmm.
going on, right? It's a misunderstanding of like diverging goals.
Yeah, it's interesting. I do like that last comment about the diverging goals, because what I was trying to think through, even when you were discussing the community piece, was like to me, what it sounds like at the heart of it is identity, right? And like in order to in order for someone to self-identify with your cause, with your movement, with that community, like you have to have a clear understanding of what it is they would be self-identifying with, right? You need to have your
Yeah.
so many elements. There's plenty of books that go into that, but
The
then
cheat code is commisery
yeah,
and
yeah,
misery. Yeah.
right,
Commiserating over misery is a cheat code.
yeah, right. There's a reason why it loves company, right? Interesting. What do you think is the biggest pushback? Not even what do you think. What is the biggest pushback that you hear when you're advocating for like open source or freely accessible community led resources?
Where are you going to get your money from? Where's the
Mm,
ROI? I get
mm,
like I know that like I'm not the strongest talker in terms of like the revenue give back
yeah.
perspective. I think that I have the right. So like I have this argument all the time about like what types of metrics directly support revenue
Mm-hmm,
versus what types of metrics support the things that support revenue, right? And so
mm-hmm,
like key experience indicators are measured a little bit differently,
yeah.
and they have more um, that's the long term slow burning kind of
Yeah.
aspect where it's
Right.
like, where's ROI? Well, how do you prove ROI currently? You do it with your funnel, you do it with your leads, you do it with your decision
Mm-hmm,
makers, whether they're whether they're converting, like all those things. But it's like, that is a very B2B approach. That is a very, you're not understanding your customer, you're just understanding your funnel.
Mm.
And when you, that's what B2D doesn't do, right? And so
Yeah.
like my whole kind of hypothesis is like around like, we need this in some areas and in like some of the strategies, but we also need this. But like, they alone aren't suitable. But when you think about them together, you actually can come from a like an inside out perspective, where it's like you understand
Mm-hmm.
who they have
Yeah.
as their resources within the MSP, because that'll change. Like somebody who has an automation specialist on staff versus somebody that doesn't, but
Mm-hmm.
they both look the same in terms of revenue and tools and all
Mm-hmm.
this other stuff otherwise, will literally have several vendors scratching their heads as to why one is successful and why one isn't, right? And so you
Mm-hmm.
can't ignore the staff within.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you flip it around and you focus on the personas and the jobs to be done, you're
Mm.
focusing on crystallizing that message.
Yeah.
And then you're also then able to have that account-based, relationship-based,
Mm-hmm.
value-added conversation that pushes the actual like, oh, like I trust this, right? And so
Yeah.
then that's the one side, but then like the where does that trust come from in the first place? That's the push for seeing them in the communities and in the engagement and like that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Fascinating. So with your, again, your unique position, which is why I like the ability to bring the context out of you, when you kind of have one foot in automation and this other foot in open source, I mean, both of those things are pretty fast evolving edges of the MSP world. What do you think, what do you see, what do you feel is coming in the next few years that most MSPs are completely unprepared for?
The so I don't know what it's called. I'm tracking. I have like every time I see a new company pop up in an automation or AI agent, whatever type of um, solution,
Yeah.
and they have a Discord, I'm joining it. I'm in several Discords now for that look like they're about to launch a V1 of a product, and they've got all their early adopters in there, and they're in their hedging stages of like what these um, agentic tools might do from an open source perspective. But then
Mm-hmm.
like like N8N and this other one, it seems really interesting, but I haven't played with it yet. But like the ones that are doing, um, nobody's going to be able to escape the fact that they have, like the people that they're hiring, especially the technicians that they're hiring, are people who like to dabble,
Yeah.
who like to be creative, who like to play with new age technology,
Mm-hmm.
who are going to have local LMMs, who are going to understand GitHub a little bit more. And so there's a lot of decentralization of products. I think that vendors probably have to worry about this more so than MSPs, because if you're an MSP, this is really a really awesome opportunity for you to educate yourselves on how to have like a proper sectioned off, like here's my business apps, and here's my like open source
Mm.
whatever, and here's like my responsibility checklist that I
Yeah.
have for them, right? And like here's like what my people are doing on their own, spinning things up for me. And if I could
Mm-hmm.
invest in some maybe some technology that like lets them create things, but
Mm-hmm.
then only internal, we're going to see a lot more homegrown intranet kind of, just with
Yeah.
new words and
Sure.
technology
Yeah.
based, right? Like companies are like, yeah, you can use AI and LLMs and all these other things to build, as long as it's within our own
Mm-hmm.
infrastructure and we're hosting it locally and all these other things. And
Yeah.
so we're going to see like a little bit of a reversion there, I think, with the like when I was at Avik and like talking to people, and they'd be like, yeah, we have our own
Sure.
in-house PSA. And it's like, I think we'll probably see a lot more of that.
Mm.
But then hopefully more tools that are like being API first
Mm.
and saying like, here's how you can still value from using our tool to like plug into. I think this is where
Mm.
we talked in the bar. I got a little bit like I was like, um,
Yeah.
the future is headless. Fuck your front end.
Right. Yeah. That'll be the
That's
title
gonna
of
be
the
like the
episode, by the way.
yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. Where do you think uh, is the biggest untapped opportunity right now then for MSPs?
For MSPs,
Hmm.
internally within your own businesses is like what I was saying, like enabling the infrastructure and the policies and the whatever to like let your curious or experienced people
Hmm.
start coming up with like what that like start building out those like pain chains and being like where are our like where is our high hanging fruit right now, where is the
Mm.
things that we believe are like difficult for us to solve. Like, let's just all get into a room and like put onto the whiteboard all of our frustrations and our impossible things and the things that we're doing in whatever. And then just like literally have like a tiger team or something that is like, let's see if we can figure this out. It doesn't
Mm.
have to like aligned with the security process, aligned with whatever, but like that's going to be the biggest potential for differentiation is how you're addressing those things that people say they can't address.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. Is the ignoring the fact that everything changed and technologically speaking, we've all been equalized is, one of the biggest risks that any business, regardless of industry, currently faces right now. At least that's my belief. So that echoes what you were saying. What would you say is one hill that you would absolutely die on, Ashley?
Oh, I actually have a list of 20.
All right.
Um,
What's number one?
um, oh goodness. Let me see if I wrote that down actually, the list of number one. I don't know if I
Hmm.
did, but my
The first one that
um
comes to mind.
the first one that comes to my mind in terms of a hill to die on.
Hmm.
Um, the how do I position this? The investments into free education and open source support build advocacy that you can't get anywhere else and will in fact be the biggest revenue driver of your business as you grow
Hmm.
more than anything else. That's probably my biggest hill to die on.
Yeah. And maybe this kind of comes back to how you were talking about like how it's measured currently and even through a
Yeah, exactly.
traditional system, right? It's like if I'm if I'm able to recap maybe your thoughts around it is like the long tail, to your point, slow burn benefits and strategic advantage that you have, even though you don't know how to measure it today, you not like the etherical you, like anyone listening, you
Yeah,
don't know how to
people
measure
in
it, right?
general. Yeah.
Um, doesn't mean and shouldn't discount like the strategic advantage that it could offer you. Is that a
Yeah.
fair representation?
Yeah, I would say so. And I would say that it's a confused idea right now too, because the people who are seeing that the most in terms
Mm-hmm.
of like everything needs to be championed by a revenue driver, right?
Yeah,
And so
right.
the revenue driver, unfortunately, in SaaS right now that is seeing this the most is marketing,
Mm-hmm.
from a brand advocacy perspective. So like the tools, like I had a tool called Orbit, and it was from the dev relations perspective where it
Mm-hmm.
was like measure your community and see who's your champions and your
Yeah.
advocates, and it was solving all of this. They got bought by Postman and they're getting
Mm.
absorbed into that Postman network, but the only other tools that are out there on the market right now doing that are tools like Common Room and other, there's some other ones, but Common Room's the
Mm-hmm.
biggest one that I can think of, and their price tag, like it wipes it, like it makes it impossible to actually get that value from an
Mm.
open source community led perspective if you're not like a massive enterprise that has a big team of people do like HubSpot
Yeah.
doing like advocacy relations behind the scenes. And it's like, we that's the thing where it's like, if we could have an accessible way to say, hey, here's all of the people that
Mm-hmm.
are changing people's minds behind the scenes when you don't even
Mm,
know, when you're not even in the room,
yeah.
because simply you were nice to them in a chat room and they said, hey, these guys are human. I'm going to advocate
Mm-hmm.
for them over this other product that does the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Like we need better ways to measure those things, but it's being eaten up by the silos of like, well, I want
Mm,
to generate revenue off of that by identifying those people so that I can use them. And it's like
yeah. It's like true
it kind of like
attribution is
gets everything
skewed
gets
essentially.
corrupted
Yeah.
eventually, right?
Mm-hmm. Interesting. What would you say is the single biggest misconception about you?
About me,
Yeah.
that I'm a hippie. I don't think this is much of a misconception. I think that people see my focus on like community first,
Mm-hmm.
anonymity, open source, whatever. Like, I think they see that and they think that I am not just thinking about the business or the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it takes me too long in like the and thens to explain why I get to the points that I get to, and so
Yeah.
often I'm like answering or like stating opinions at step B because I'm already at G,
Mm-hmm.
and people are like,
They got lost
you
at
just
A
haven't,
or something.
yeah, like
Yeah.
that doesn't make sense based on my understanding or whatever. So,
Yeah.
um, I'm ahead. Like I think that I'm, yeah, I think that's probably it. People assume that I am not thinking long term because I've thought there and come back.
Yeah. Interesting. If people want to learn more, understand more, or just follow you and kind of tap into the wealth of knowledge and information that you have, where's the best place for them to reach out or to get connected?
That's funny because it's kind of like what I was just telling you about. I made that little profile page that was
Yeah.
like, here's where you can learn more. But on LinkedIn, probably right now is the best place. I'm on Discord, in
Mhm.
Cyberdrain, MSP Geek, all of the
Yeah. Any
local
community that someone
places.
would be in, you're probably there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. And then I don't get to let you go either before giving you the opportunity to ruin the next guest's day, which my last
Mhm.
guest told me that the pre-frame needed to be set different because they don't want to ruin anyone's day. So you can think about it however you'd like. But if you could leave one question behind for the next guest that they had to answer, what would that question be?
I don't get to know anything about who they are or what they
Mm,
care about.
no.
Um,
So it could be any torpedo you want, really.
oh man, I don't like such a hold on. Um,
We
I
can
guess let's frame this. Okay, I got an idea that I
perfect.
was thinking of, but I don't know how to position it.
Okay.
Um, what about something around? Oh, I lost you. There you are. What about something around like Karl Popper's theory of like how um, anything is like dogmatic unless you can have a way to like say that it can be disproven. So like, what is a strongly held belief and what could disprove it
Hmm.
or something like that? Maybe
Deep.
I'll have to think about how should that be phrased, but like, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
like you
What
can't
is
like
one deeply held belief that you
thinking about the
have?
bully about the
Yeah.
industry,
Yeah.
so then keeping it super like
Right.
industry level.
Sure.
um but like it's meant to like Freud being like, oh, everything comes back to the parents, like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, like it just hasn't happened yet, and it's like, well, no, you can't. If you can't disprove it, like
Yeah.
I can prove gravity because every time I pulled out a plate, and
Yeah.
like I can't disprove it, right? So
Yeah.
um what would it take to disprove gravity? It would take me holding out a plate and having it
Having
not
it
drop.
not fall. Yeah.
Meh.
Mm. Interesting. That'll be a fascinating question to construct around the industry and the community. To your point.
Yeah, like thinking beginner's mind, thinking about where other people's beliefs and realities are coming from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That'd be awesome. All right. Ashley, thank you so much for coming on the show. And also thank you to the audience for tuning in and hopefully having some light bulbs turn on and some challenging thoughts even around You know, maybe your question actually could be part of the question to the audience in this one, is like, what are those potentially false beliefs that they have around, is it community, is it vendors, is it open source, or any of the things that we talked about today that they could really sit back, reflect on, and be challenged by.
And hopefully, while they've been watching this, you have perfected all of my ramblings to
Oh yeah.
sound very
Yeah.
insightful.
Absolutely. Again, thank you for coming on the show, and we'll see y'all next time.